Welcome to Ash to Ash, cigar-based podcast hosted by Brian and co-hosted by Bailey. Our podcast is divided into three segments or sections, much like a cigar. The first third, second third, and the bottom third. Within the first third, we're going to break it down into the perfect pairing, cutting some etiquette or not, and then we'll do an ash check. Second third will be our main topic of the episode and a round table and an ash check. And that third or bottom third will be Ask an Aficionado and In Case You Didn't Know. Without further ado, the perfect pairing. Today we'll be pairing my father, the judge, and the Woodford Reserve Kentucky Straight Bourbon.
Good stuff. For me today, I'm just going to be pairing my cigar with water. I wasn't able to get a little drink situation going, but in the future episodes, I'm sure I'll have some back.
Excellent. Which brings us to cutting something. We're working on the name for that, but it entails the ritual of addressing your cigar, cutting it, lighting it, and then taking that first sip of the pairing. Most cigars are wrapped in individually plastic wrappers, one for obvious reasons.
Like keeping people's fingers off of your cigar, their oils and stuff.
Exactly. When you go to purchase a cigar in a cigar shop or a lounge, you get a lot of people who are touching and picking up and putting back cigars. So you want to keep it clean. You don't want to smoke something that someone's hand's been on. So we're going to go ahead and remove the cigar from the wrapper here.
It also helps keeps a little bit of the humidity on the inside. It's not as good as a humidor, but it's better than leaving your stick without the plastic covering.
Okay. First, an important part of the ritual is to gently squeeze the cigar. If it gives a little bit, it's fresh, and if it's firm, it's probably stale. So you can just pop it back in your humidor, let it soak in some moisture, maybe a couple days or a week, and then it'll be good to go.
What side am I supposed to squeeze? Just down the middle?
From the cap, which is the closed end, to the foot. Just gentle squeezes. You don't want to break the wrapper, and you don't want to disfigure the stick. My father has a foot band as well as the regular band that you hold. You want to hold this throughout your smoke to keep the oils from getting into the tobacco, and then you're smoking the tobacco.
Yeah, because pretty much anything that you add to the cigar would change the flavor profile of it when you're smoking it.
Definitely. So the second step, I like to take, inhale a little bit of the aroma. It's that first taste of the cigar.
Oh, that's true. People say that you can taste with your nose something, like your sound.
Definitely. Your tongue really doesn't have much to do with it without your nose, without being able to smell. That's why when most people are sick and they can't smell, food doesn't taste the same.
Yeah, that happened with a lot of people with COVID, that it was a weird side effect. You lost your taste buds when you were going through that.
Yeah. Now, the next step would be the cut. And again, you cut on the cap. If you pay attention, the cap is kind of like a little helmet on the end of the cigar. And you either have a straight cut, a V cut, or a punch. Today I'm going to use the punch which is a device that puts a small hole, circular hole, in the cap.
This is my punch. Do you have a cutter with you to show what it looks like?
Yeah. Most cutters are your guillotine cutters.
As you smoke a cigar, you'll eventually find out what's your preferred way to draw from it. Each cut gives you a different pull from your cigar. And some cigars have a different end, like a torpedo cigar is more conical at the bottom. So you can't really use a punch for that one. Those you really have to use like a guillotine cutter or whatever.
And before you cut your cigar, you should always wet the cap so that it doesn't fracture or break on you. We'll do a pod on cutting, and we'll get more detailed in it. Today, our first episode, we're just gonna go through it. Our next step on the ritual is to take a few dry pulls. A dry pull is a pull on the cigar without it being lit. The air will still go through the cigar. The easier the flow of air, the better the cigar, and the more humidity it has in it, it's not stale. And this is the second time you'll be able to taste the quality of the stick.
And then like the reason why we call this like a ritual is because each step is very important to the end result of smoking your cigar. You bought this cigar for its flavor profile and for you to get all the chemical aromas that are associated with it. So it's very important, to not touch the sides and ruin it with oil. It's very important to be careful how you take off the wrappers so you're not tearing down your cigar, because it's all a process that shows you at the end, the work that you put into it. You have to work with a cigar more than like a cigarette or something or anything else that you're smoking.
And it is a ritual that you can make your own. These are the steps that we take, and you can try many different techniques, going from picking up the cigar to finally smoking it. It's something that works for you. So now the last step is to light the cigar. Any flame that is odorless is best. Sure, the matches in some circles are the best way. Other circles, the butane torch, but never a big lighter or anything like that, because you get way more fumes into your tobacco, and you don't want to smoke that. When lighting the cigar, you go at a 45-degree angle and you toast the foot, which is basically getting an even burn, so that when you smoke the cigar, it'll be even and you won't have wrapper on one side and ash on the other. After you get that even burn, and you do it holding it, not up to your face. And then when you go to take your pulls while lighting, never aim for obvious reasons, never aim your torch at your face. You got hair like me and Bailey, you will send your mustache or your beard easily.
And these torches are hot, like you'll burn a hole in your face if you're not careful. And I've definitely burned my beard off, my mustache off a couple times.
As you can see, I have an even burn. If it's not, you're welcome to address it again. Great cigar, great cigar.
Tastes good.
You don't want to just take a cigar and just puff it straight through. It's meant to take a couple of pulls relax for a moment, let the tobacco get in your saliva, and then you can blow out the smoke. And then you take your pairing and you hit it. I want to toast this first episode to many more great things: health, prosperity, and peace. Through time, I'll get better with my toast.
And also, like, an important thing is like a pairing is like a nice added experience to your cigar. Certain cigars complement certain drinks well, and certain foods as well. Just like how you would have a steak paired with a certain whiskey, or a steak paired with a certain kind of wine, you can combine these food and flavor profiles with your cigar. So it's like he was saying earlier, you know, you get a few draws out of your cigar, and then you take a sip out of whatever you're drinking, whether it be coffee or, you know, Woodford Reserve. And then, like, you know, you just get a different flavor, like a different experience. Like, I'm not the best at understanding my palate and what I'm tasting. I'm still learning, like, how a cigar is different than everything else. But it is a nice combination, even as a beginner, to have something. Even water hits a little different after you're drinking it with, like, the tobacco all in your gums and in your mouth. So a little extra experimentation about, like, finding your favorite cigar and what it matches with, like, your favorite your whiskey brand or your drink of choice.
Definitely. Our last segment of this first third, something we call Etiquette or Not. What I want to do is then introduce a couple of questionable things that cigar smokers do to see if you, Bailey, can determine whether it's actually etiquette or not. First thing is dipping your cigar. And what that means is you dip the cap into whatever you're pairing, whether it be bourbon or scotch or even coffee. Is that cigar etiquette or not?
What would be the point of dipping your cigar anyways? Like, I don't get that.
I'll tell you, is it etiquette or not?
No, I'm asking you, why would a person want to? Like before it's etiquette, like, you know, why would I even want to put my cigar in my water or in my coffee? Why not just drink it?
Well, because you're putting it in your mouth. And then you can taste whatever you dipped it in, obviously.
But having the cap at the submerged wouldn't mess it up a little bit?
You're asking questions instead of answering whether it's etiquette or not. Whether you think it's etiquette or not, you gotta just off the top of your head.
So if you're asking me, I don't think it's not etiquette because I'm not smoking the cigar. Like, if it was, like, let's say a joint or something that's shared between people, then I would feel like it's a little bit unetiquette to be dipping your cigar. I guess maybe if I was a cigar maker, it might be a little bit disrespected if you dipped your cigar, because, like, some people who make steak want you to taste the steak without any, like, barbecue sauce on it or anything else. So I don't know if it's a thing like that where the creator of the cigar wants you to experience it just as is with the flavor they wanted, so they might not like you putting Cabernet or whiskey on it, but I don't know. If you were smoking with me and you dipped your cigar, I don't think that would make me not want to smoke with you anymore. I don't think it's, like, unethical to do that.
The actual answer is
failure to launch.
We did not hit record on Riverside. I just realized that. Thought.
welcome to the Aficionado Cigar Pod, Ash to Ash.
I think we can continue just going from it, and we'll just use the camera angles from our phones. if that makes sense. Yeah. Because if we restart, we can't do the cutting and stuff anymore because we already.
All right. Okay.
So, sorry for the technical difficulties. We just realized now that our POV camera wasn't recording, but we'll fix it in post and we'll just continue on from what we were talking about. But we left off on the etiquette or not. I don't think dipping your cigar is unethical. So, what are your feelings on it?
I did research. Winston Churchill was a famous dipper, and he used to dip his cigars in brandy, actually in between pulls. But as you mentioned, the cigar was handcrafted by professionals who designed it to be smoked as is. And the work that they put into how they design the tones and the flavors throughout the 3/3 of the cigar were on purpose. And if a person is interested in flavors, they have what they call infusion, where they place the cigars into a closed container, sealed airtight, with a container of some flavor, and it will absorb it into the leaf.
Okay, so there's flavored cigars is what you're saying. Like if I wanted like a more whiskey flavored cigar, there might be like one that has more whiskey notes to it.
Correct, as well as cherry and strawberry and most appealing is your chocolate or your vanilla flavors.
Well, this is chocolate. Yeah, coffee would be the one for me. I don't want like strawberry flavored cigar or anything, but coffee would probably be what I would get. Coffee or whiskey flavored. But when you said who was the one? It was Winston Churchill. You said who was dipping his cigars. I don't know a lot, but I know that he was like legitimately like the cigar smoker. They made a whole line of cigars after him. So there might be something to like what's the word I'm looking for? His experience level might show you that it might be another echelon to smoking. There might be something there.
I think it just shows that even the most profound cigar smokers can do stupid stuff to the cigar. It's kind of like buying a Lamborghini and putting rims on it.
Okay. Ooh, that's a good one. Or like a bumper sticker or something.
Right. So the next etiquette or not is to ash or not to ash. And what ashing is as you smoke it, as you can tell, I have a little bit of ash going. Do you flick it and keep smoking? Most people either flick it or they don't. Is that etiquette or not?
All right. Well, I don't think it's unethical initially. I'm used to smoking other things like vapes or little joints or whatever. So I'm used to flicking my ash. So I don't really naturally see the issue with ashing. I just feel like if you don't want to make a mess, maybe clean up your area. So I don't see it being disrespectful if you ash your cigar. Anyway.
The official Aficionado cigar pod answer to that is not etiquette. The cigar from foot to cap is tobacco. The object of, or the reason for smoking a cigar is to pull air through said tobacco for the experience. So if your tobacco is still there in the form of ash, you're still pulling air through it, which means you're still experiencing the full smoke. And if you're plucking half the smoke off, or half of the tobacco off because it's ash, you have a different experience.
Okay.
Different experience. And now you can tell the quality of tobacco by how well the ash sits, which means it stays there. This entire cigar, we can get all the way to the bottom third and still have big ash.
Yeah, I've seen that in photos. I've never been able to get my cigar to last past the first band. It usually falls off on its own, or I bump it by mistake. But I would like to experience that at least once to see what it's like to have like the end of my cigar, the last third, but still have ash onto it. Have you ever made it to the end of a cigar with that?
I have once, and we'll challenge our viewing and listening audience to see if they can get big ash and snap some pictures, email it to us, info@theaficionadocorp.com. info@theaficionadocorp.com.
And I was just gonna say that's also what our ash check is about. We're trying to see if we can make it to the end of the show without our ash falling off, and just every part of this the podcast is checking in to see how far we're going through,
as well as to discuss the experience you've had, because each third of a cigar is a different smoke. As we become true aficionados of the cigar, we'll be able to detect the differences. Last etiquette or not is, do you remove the band before smoking or not? What do you think?
Well, I'm gonna assume it might be a little bit of both, a little bit of mix. I think you need to keep at least one band so you can rest your finger on, so you're not like, putting it where you're putting your draw from, or you're adding oils to it. But like this cigar has 2 bands on it, so I don't imagine it's an issue if I were to take off the first one. It actually had 3 bands, but it had one on the foot. So maybe 1 band to keep on. But if I had to stick through, I would say it's probably unethical to rip off your band before you start smoking it.
Okay. The aficionado answer is, if you have 1 band, you keep it. If you have 2 bands, it's perfectly okay to remove, and actually recommended to remove the band closest to the foot before you start, because later on it's difficult to hold your ash while trying to take this one off. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that the second band, which is the one closest to the cap, as your ash gets closer to that band, the heat inside of the cigar will loosen the glue, and it will literally slide, so you don't have to try to peel it off. Peeling off is a sure way to lose your ash, but you can literally slide it closer to the cap. And some people say once you get it to the cap and then your ash gets to the band, your cigar is done. But that's still part of your bottom third, which is still quality smoke.
A lot of cigar left past that band, like a 4 inch at least.
Exactly. Because sometimes you got a real wide band. In this case, that's good smoke right there. So, all right, we'll do our first ash check. How's this cigar treating you?
I had a question about that. The second etiquette or not, about like the ash to ash or not to ash. I'm assuming, let's say we're at a cigar lounge and I come to sit down and I knock your ash off. Can that be something like, as a regular mistake, or is that a party foul, like an instant sign of disrespect if I knock someone's ash down?
That's definitely flag on the play, because that's not your stick. It's not your stick. It is not yours to de-ash it. You see what I'm saying? You may have a personal relationship with your cigar, and you're going to win by getting full ash. Your cigar may be against you, trying to make you de-ash, and then somebody jumps in. That's flag on the play.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Especially if you're amongst strangers. You're amongst your crew, your family, your boys, and You don't want to see somebody with a bigger ash than you. Guard your ash. Guard your ash.
Okay, you clear that up for me. So what were you saying before I asked that question?
Our first ash check. How's this cigar treating you?
The first pull was very nice. It is. I'm still understanding my palate and how a cigar tastes, because nothing really tastes like a cigar. But it's good. It doesn't feel too strong. I do feel the tobacco tingling sensation in my brain, but I like it. It's going pretty well. My ash is somewhat even. If you can tell, like one side is a little bit bigger than the other, and I think that was just due to me lighting one side a little bit too much before the other. But I like it so far. It's a good cigar. How about you?
Yeah, my father, the judge, has been a long favorite of mine. Just recently, I got a new number 1/number 2, the Oliva V.
I actually have an Oliva V. I haven't had it before, ever.
But this is a great weekend morning stick, especially paired with this Woodford. It's kind of early to be on Woodford for me, but I had my coffee already.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Yeah. Okay.
So now we're gonna move into our second third of the pod. This is where we'll have our main topic of discussion. If we have a guest interviewer, we will introduce them and begin the discussion. And let's get into it.
Okay. Just for this first episode, I have my script tapped on my notes. I'll have a better way of reading it in the future. So today's first episode is going to be the history of cigars. The main questions I want to ask, or at least attempt to answer today, are going to be what are the origins of the modern cigar, and how far back in human history have cigars even been around? Is this something that popped up in the last 6 years? You know, how long has it been established? So in my research, I found out a lot of interesting things, but I'll start off with the definition, like what makes a cigar versus like a cigarette or something else. So a cigar can be defined as a tube-shaped tobacco product that is made of tightly rolled, dried tobacco leaves, all wrapped inside a tobacco wrapper. Essentially, it's tobacco on tobacco on tobacco. The whole product is tobacco, from the wrapper to everything that's inside. Some tobaccos have other additives in it, but typically a cigar is just that. It's just one bundle of tobacco. So they say that, and this is something I wrote, that cigar has been used as a tool by humans throughout most of recorded history. The ancestor of the modern cigar is said to be found dating back all the way to ancient days. Our earliest form of evidence for cigars comes from the ancient Mayan civilization. Cigars were found painted on the sides of more than a few Mayan potteries. And we have some images that we'll look up about some of these pottery images. And then we'll screen share that right now. But as we're bringing that up, just a little about the Mayans. The Mayan Empire is centered in the tropical lowlands of what is now Guatemala, reaching the peak of its power and its influence around the 6th century AD. So that's old world. That's like the Aztecs, the Incas, the Mayans are one of those big 3 ancient civilizations. So we're looking right now at one of these pots, and like you can see, like, I don't know if you can zoom in on his mouth, but it looks like some monkey man with a long ass tail smoking something, you know. You can see the little imprints. Do you have more images, or is it just
Yeah, I do. Here's another one.
So yeah, you can definitely see the Mayan art in this, like his face, his hair, and he seems like he has it rolled up pretty fat. Cigar.
Now, on this one,
Yeah.
it speaks to some side information about why they were even smoking. And to my understanding, and it's been said that it's a connection between the mortal and immortal, or the physical and the spiritual. And I noticed in this one, I didn't pay attention until just right now, that these little images here are pine cones, which were symbolism of the pineal gland, or the third eye, which was the part of the physical that was the spiritual.
I didn't know that. That's really cool. It's really interesting.
Yeah, so it's reiterated here.
And it kind of makes you think, like, what was the logic behind the first human to roll a cigar? You know, like, how do they know it was something you can actually smoke?
Was he just walking around saying, tobacco, let me grab this and put some fire to it and inhale it or pull it?
If I had to guess, like, what had happened, and this is just pure speculation, but you know sage, how sage is in a bundle and it smokes and it lasts? I feel that people knew about sage and they knew about burning certain herbs that were not edible, but that would cause, like, some kind of brain effect, you know, some effect to your brain. And I think logically, maybe someone smoked a sage stick, you know, like they saw how the end of it felt and realized that the flavor sucked. So they probably did some, like, experimenting about other things that they can bundle up together and smoke slowly. And then maybe eventually they got to tobacco and realized that, yeah, it burns perfectly. But who knows? Who knows how anything was really, like, started off? So the Mayan people, they excelled at many things such as agriculture, pottery, writing, calendar making, obviously, and a lot of mathematics. They left behind an astonishing amount of impressive architecture and very symbolic artwork. And you can see some of their symbolism in what we just looked at right now. Some of those images of smoking and tying it to, like, your consciousness almost. But the Mayans are believed to have used cigars in ritualistic ceremonies, kind of like you were alluding to earlier. And the true intended use of cigars, which at the time was called a cigar with an S, very similar to how we call it now, but the original intended use is really lost to time, you know? We can only really infer what people were doing with cigars by the images that we find. But who knows? You know, this might have been something that only, like, priests smoke, or a certain class of person was smoking cigars. But like I said, much of what we know is from people long gone from this earth. However, the Mayans' cultural contribution is still being smoked and shared through humankind throughout all of human history. From sailing across the ocean to landing on the moon, cigars have been there, used as a tool designed to help and assist the user even through the most stressful of times. And that's something I've learned after, like, looking at the history of cigars. People don't typically abuse cigars how they abuse alcohol, to, like, have some sort of break from self or break from reality. People don't smoke cigars to have escapism in that way. Even though cigar smoke does provide escapism, it's mainly used as a stress manager, you know? Throughout all of history, it's a clarity of mind to help you focus on a particular subject, or just even take time to just focus on being alive. But that's so far about the Mayans. There's not a lot known about what the Mayans were doing with cigars. We know that they shared it with the cultures in South America and a little bit of the Caribbean, but the origins of the cigar is typically attributed to the Mayans.
Okay. Any more about the history, or are you ready for the round table?
We're going to keep going to the history. But do you have anything about the Mayans you want to go before we go to the next side?
Yeah.
So after the Mayans comes good old Christopher Columbus. Fuck. And there we go. The first stale ash of the season. Yeah. I guess I'll go, and I think it was all due to my lighting, because you can see one side is still bigger than the other. So it shows you each step of that process of starting your cigar is important. What's your ash doing right now?
Still going strong. And I'm noticing that you're pulling way too often. You pull, relax for a few minutes, and then come back to it.
That's probably it too. Probably asking way too much. So, Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus was a geographically challenged navigator who, on his voyages searching for a shortcut to India, found himself taking the long way around and eventually reached the shores of what is now known to be the Bahamas. Confused and far from home, Christopher Columbus made observations on the natives and he traded goods with them. Some of the things that he received was like a small crate of dried, inedible, rolled bundles of tobacco. He didn't know what they were. Like the Bahamians just gave him a box of tobacco leaves, cigars, and since he couldn't eat them, he didn't know what they were used for. He ended up throwing them overboard. You know, he just didn't have space for them on his boat. And it wasn't until he got to Cuba that he actually found what they were used for. And yeah, I was like, yeah, when he got to Cuba, Christopher would learn the proper use of the item he so carelessly tossed as trash. He wrote in his diary what he witnessed the Cuban locals doing. And this is a quote from his diary. They were lighting the ends of the stick with the flame and drinking the smoke that it was produced. He called it drinking the smoke because it was so foreign to him. He didn't have an actual word for the act of smoking. You know, he just thought it was drinking out of them. So despite the men not knowing anything about smoking, the locals introduced them to the way of the cigar, and they soon fell in love with the complex aromas, the flavor profiles of the tobacco, and they were literally bringing crate loads of the cigars back with them. So they threw it away at once. They started experiencing it, and they're like, no, we got to bring as much as we can back to the people at home to show them what we found. Rodrigo de Juarez, I'll put his name up on the screen. He was one of the men who worked with Christopher Columbus, and he was one of the men who initially fell in love with cigars. Like there's only two other guys who really were the aficionados of the group, and Rodrigo brought a lot of cigars back home with him. But when he reached Spain, he found himself being arrested because the king at the time thought the act of expelling smoke from one's mouth and nostrils could only be the work of the devil. So you have a bunch of Europeans in Spain who've never even seen a cigar, and then you come back and everyone's blowing smoke out of their faces. So there was a group of the population who were too Protestant, too religious to even accept cigar smoke. So a lot of people were persecuted. Wait, so you knocked it off of something? You didn't drop it off. You like rubbed it on something.
I knocked it on my laptop.
Damn. Hostile environment. But just imagine, and then he was in prison for 6 years, and then he was released. But when Rodrigo was released to the public, cigar had taken over Spain. It was like the new trend, the new fad. And I can only imagine how he felt to be in prison for 6 years of his life and to come out that what he was locked up for is now the new cultural trend. It's now the new up and popping thing to do, a new high society thing to do. Which leads us to our next section. That little thing with Christopher Columbus was just him discovering cigars and introducing it to the eastern side of the world. And then we move on to the industry part of the cigar. Spain eventually realized that, holy shit, cigars is something that people could use and they enjoyed. And a lot of the rich, political, and affluent citizens of Spain were the people who could afford cigars and smoke them regularly. So the status and the stereotype of having wealth and success being tied to smoking cigars started from there. You know, common people couldn't afford to get a cigar that was made in South America and have it sent to them on a regular basis. So the Spanish started getting enterprising, and they started, shipping these cigars to different places in Europe. They started creating cigar factories, and you had things being like created like the cigarello, the cigarette. You had like variations of a cigar. During this time, that's when people started smoking tobacco out of a pipe. You know, tobacco became the new product to try to inhale. During all of this, this industry, this new boom of business, Spain realized that geography, the geography of the best place to grow and cultivate tobacco was Cuba. Cuba has a very unique climate and plant life and animal life that is very unique to growing quality cigars. Their soil as well is very rich. You know, and you have places like Dominican Republic, you have places like Puerto Rico that are in the same geographical area, but Cuba has like the right mix of everything to produce these cigars. So Spain, they ended up colonizing the island, and they came up with this business deal contract that the Cuban cigar makers were not allowed to make cigars for other countries, for other companies. So Spain essentially grew a monopoly on the tobacco product of Cuba. But in the process, it put Cuba on the map. Cuban cigars became the quintessential standard of a quality cigar. And then soon around the world, people knew that's just like you couldn't get tobacco anywhere else, which then led to like Cuba's fame with cigars. There's a guy called Fidel Castro who is very famous for smoking cigars all the time. And at the height of Cuban's cigar craze, he had his bodyguards smoking cigars pretty regularly. And Fidel one day smelled the cigar of one of his bodyguards, and he was like, damn, what are you smoking? Like, where did you get that? And the guy was like, my cousin made this for me. You know, I didn't buy it anymore. He just makes, you know, cigars. So Fidel was like, oh, word? Your cousin, he works for me now. Like, his whole life is going to be making cigars for me and my military officers and all the important people that I'm trying to, like, support in my life. So that guy who was, like, you know, forced to work underneath Fidel ended up being the creator of Cohiba. Cohiba was the brand for Fidel and all of his officers, his generals. And then so in Cuba, which was already the world spot for cigars, there was a new world leader. So Cohiba is like the iPhone of cigars, or like, you know, the Bill Gates of the cigar world. You know, it's like a new echelon of class, a new echelon of quality. And then from its inception to even modern day, Cohiba is like one of the top cigar brands. So this is coming up towards the end of, like, you know, the history of cigars, is that people around the world were smoking it. A lot of celebrities and political leaders like Winston Churchill, you were saying, were smoking cigars. So people in the public were seeing cigars more often, and regular people started buying them, but they couldn't buy it as often as a wealthy person. They would only smoke cigars for like weddings, graduations, special events. Even like at the birth of a baby, some people would smoke cigars. So one of these political leaders who loves cigars is John F. Kennedy. And Kennedy, he did some sucker shit, in my opinion. It was during the Cold War, and I think it was after the Bay of Pigs fiasco with Cuba, Russia, and the United States, as a way to stifle Russian power and to stifle communism. The U.S. was going to put an embargo on the Cuban cigar, which is like their number one export at the time, was their tobacco. So it's a huge financial chop to stop that. But right before he wrote that into law, JFK sent his assistant or his secretary to buy up all the Cuban cigars he could in Washington. At the end of it, he's reported to buy like 1,200 cigar sticks before he the next day made it illegal to own Cuban cigars. And that's just a little part of cigar history that I think was very sucker. It shows you that some people in power intentionally create rules that they have no intention of following themselves. Like they literally think, and it's not everyone, but some people feel like they're just above the rules, that they're special. So, I don't know, but it also shows you the quality and the infatuation of a cigar. You know, that he's going to make it illegal, but he can't get rid of it. You know, it's not like, imagine the president saying cocaine is illegal, but then he bought like kilos and kilos and kilos of cocaine and he just stashed it in the White House. And, you know, it's similar to that. Even though they're different substances, it's just a weird flex, a power move to do. So it had the unintentional effect of raising the popularity of a Cuban cigar, because once you tell people they can't have something, they want it even more. But it was just very hard to get a Cuban cigar. I think in modern days, it's still illegal to sell a cigar, like if you had a Cuban cigar. So if you had like a cigar lounge or a cigar shop, you couldn't just have a line of Cuban cigars, authentic Cuban cigars that you can sell to people. But you can go to Cuba, buy as many Cuban cigars as you want, and just bring it back home and smoke it later. You just can't resell it. And that pretty much brings us to modern day cigar smoking, where it's lost a little bit of its popularity as it was in the 20s and the past, where you would just see people going out to like special events smoking cigars. People still do it. Morning. People still smoke them, but the status comes a little different. I think my cigar just went out. I'll light it in a bit. But today, the modern cigar smoker is a person who's in touch with the old world. You know, they have a sophistication to them. It's like the same as being a wine connoisseur. It's like one of those hobbies that, I don't know, it's not an expensive pastime, but it's a sophisticated pastime. It's not like you're drinking a bunch of beers or anything. In the past, where just owning a cigar was a status symbol, modern cigar smokers kind of look at the brand that you're smoking to see, you know, to rank your status. Just like alcohol, there's top shelf and there's bottom shelf cigars. But what they do for cigars is they make anniversary editions, or they make special editions where they'll only make a few sticks out of that line, and that's all they're gonna make. So because of the rarity of the cigar, increases, like, you know, the popularity. So like if I'm smoking with you at a lounge and you see I'm smoking the Cohiba special anniversary edition that you know they only made 100 of, it's like, and I'm just smoking it for no special occasion, that's the status. You know, that's the sign of the flex of, I've made it to a point in my life where I'm successful enough to be having access to really rare cigars, and I can smoke these really rare cigars at my leisure, you know, whenever I see fit. But that's pretty much, in a nutshell, the history of cigar smoking. It's been with humans pretty much forever, you know, and a lot of successful, you know, work-driven people have used cigars to enhance their work. Like Winston Churchill, JFK, Mark Twain, a lot of people have used cigars just to help them be more creative, be more focused, be more attentive. So cigars are here to stay. And I think it's cool that, like, it's something that happened from ancient Earth, you know, something that humans were doing before we had technology, before we had the ability to fly. You know, we had certain things that helped us with our mentality and stuff. But do you have any comments on any of the cigar history? Any points that, like, stood out to you?
No, it was good information. Great way to start our first podcast is a little history lesson.
Yeah, know where you came from a little bit.
Yeah.
So right now, I'm gonna relight my cigar, and you taught me this. Like, the proper way to relight a cigar when it's been out is to get all the ash, clear it, and then just relight it, essentially.
So while are you addressing your cigar, we're going to move into the final segment of the second third of our pod, called the round table, where we'll have three topics. One, news in the cigar world, space tech and defense, and current and relevant events in the regular news.
Do you want to do an ash check from after the main topic, or no?
Yeah, after the roundtable, we'll do another ask check. Um, so go ahead and screen share again.
But how's your flavor? Is it like getting stronger for you yet?
It definitely is. The second third is a different world from the first, and it's this is a great cigar. I can't say it enough. In the cigar world, what we have going on is I went to the cigaraficionado.com site, and what I wanted to talk about, piggybacking off of the history, is Cohiba versus Cohiba. A lot of people don't realize that there are two brands. One, where the cigars are authentically produced in Cuba, and the other is in Nicaragua. So apparently they've been doing battle for some time over the name.
They're not the same company?
They're not the same company.
All right. I thought that Cohiba had a different factory in another country to get past the embargo. So I thought that they had Cohiba in Nicaragua or Dominican Republic, but Nicaragua, just so people could buy them in the U.S. But that's not the case?
That is not the case. As you mentioned, the authentic Cuban Cohiba brand was Cuban-owned. As I believe it's the government. And then the one in Nicaragua is owned by a company called General Cigar.
Okay. And who owns General Cigar?
I do not know that yet.
Okay. So what's this article talking about?
So it's basically saying been a seesaw court battle over the Cohiba brand. It's moving back and forth in the favor of the Cubans. They made a U.S. trademark trial, and the appeal board ruled to cancel the General Cigar Company's Cohiba trademark.
Really? So what does that mean? Hold on. So what does that mean for them?
They were selling non-Cuban versions of the Cuban brand in the United States to appeal to people's vanity of the name.
Mm-hmm. But if their trademark was canceled, does that mean that they have to go underneath a different name, like a different brand?
It means that the non-Cuban have to cease and desist. And of course, they're going to appeal the ruling, you know, but they are, I don't want to call them a knockoff, but you always have companies that will create a product with a name so similar and a likeness or a logo.
Sprite and Sierra Mist.
Exactly. It's the same thing, but you change the name and change the logo so you can get away with it.
Okay. So like you said, like it's like the knockoff version, like the non-name brand. It's like not knockoff, like it's fake, but it's not where you're getting it from.
Exactly. So in the tech world, tech and space and military, we have SpaceX, the Starship.
So this one, I saw an article saying that SpaceX is getting ready for their orbital launch in March, and I'm a big space guy. Like I've been obsessed with space since I was a kid. And despite what you think about Elon Musk, will separate the company from its owner. But SpaceX, I think, is very important, to humanity. I think I won't go too long on this, but like in the 1920s, not the 1920s, like the 60s, we were in the Cold War, and tensions were very, very high. Like we were just kind of like now on the brink of nuclear war, and everyone hated each other. At least the Americans hated Russia, and we had our space race, right? And I think that was the universal connector. But before you play the video, I want to pause for a second. The universal connector is space. One thing I thought was really cool is that we had a rendezvous. A rendezvous in space is when two objects meet together. Whenever an astronaut goes to the International Space Station, they rendezvous and they connect. The first rendezvous in space was done between America and Russia, where even though they were on Earth fighting each other and blowing each other up in submarines and shit, above the Earth, they were connecting. They had a handshake in space. And I say that to say that even when the world is an ugly place, space could be that hopeful thing that gets people to think of the greater picture, the bigger picture. And so, fast forward to modern day, SpaceX's whole thing is to make space travel as convenient or readily turnaroundable like flying an airplane. Before, when an airplane was first created, only really wealthy people can go on it. It was very dangerous. And then as the FAA was created and as other, processes were put in place, an airplane can fly from here to Ohio, from here to China, fuel up, do some maintenance, and be ready to fly again within an hour or 2 hours. So that is his whole philosophy he wants to do with a rocket. He wants to be able to send a rocket up into space, land it, and then refurbish it and use it for another launch within the span of like a turnaround of a couple days. That's his goal, eventually a couple hours. Let's see, I got something going on right here. All right, so that'll be okay if they do. But so this rocket, if you pull up back the screen share, this rocket, his Starship is what it's called. That is the machine he wants to use for we're almost done. That's the machine that they're going to use to facilitate all of their space travel. So in this video, if you pull it up now, the Starship one, this is a test that they did back in 2021, I believe. And it's to test the concept of reusing a rocket after it's been launched into atmosphere. So in the video we're about to watch, they're going to launch this rocket up into a level of about 30,000 feet, and it's going to free float for a little bit, and then it's designed to go back to its launch point and land itself. So the major innovation of this rocket are the little fins that you'll see on the side. Typically a rocket is just a tube that goes up in the air. But this rocket has like little wings on the side of it that when it's landing, it acts like a skydiver and it's able to use the aerodynamic forces to glide itself back to position. And the physics behind this is that it's using the atmosphere to slow itself down rather than using rocket fuel. So it gets to the point where it's slowing down and it's gonna fall, and the wings allow the rocket to correct itself, and at that point they turn on all the engines and it slowly lands into the point where it's standing upright. Do you have the video ready or no?
It's been playing.
Oh, I can't see it on the screen. That's why.
Oh, what you were talking about?
I couldn't see it on the screen.
It's been people talking.
Okay, but is it on the screen right now?
It is. And it's being shared.
Okay. So we'll just get the video later. What part is it at right now? Because I can't see it.
They're showing the engine throttling.
Okay, just skip a little bit to where you can see when it's in the air, flying a little bit. And then after that, if you skip to
It is.
6 minutes 8 seconds, that's when it starts to do the land, and we could just skip to that part.
Now it's in the free fall.
And one thing I think that's very cool about that video, the rocket is the size of a 12-story building. So we're literally watching a building fall from the sky and correct itself. And it does it all autonomously.
Now it's landing.
So right now what you should be seeing is the engine's cutting on and it's doing that land maneuver. And this is amazing. Like, never in history have we been able to land a rocket that big. SpaceX has these Falcon 9 boosters, which are they've broken records upon records about being able to launch and re-land themselves, and they use that for their Falcon 9 rockets. And the benefit of it is that in space, you spend all these years building this complex machine just to throw it away as soon as you're finished with it, you know? Like, all rockets typically land in the ocean, and that's a huge waste of money. So if you could reuse the same machine that you use to launch into atmosphere, you're instantly saving so much, and you're allowing us to go more often. So what's important now is that test was just an atmospheric launch test to see, can we land a rocket falling from a great height? So the next test coming up in March is going to be the orbital launch test. So there's two things to know about space travel. There's going up into space, and then there's actually creating orbit. So it's all about your speed. Jeff Bezos has a company called Blue Origin, where they take tourists up to just above the atmosphere. You are technically in zero gravity for a couple minutes, and then you come back down to Earth. I say zero gravity and not space, because in space there's something called the Kármán line, and that's about like 80 kilometers above the atmosphere. And the Kármán line is basically an internationally recognized point where the atmosphere is so thin that you're considered to be in space, because the higher you go up, the less atmosphere there is. So just because you are past the Kármán line doesn't mean you're in space or you're in orbit, because of Earth's gravity, it's going to pull you back down. So in order to achieve orbit, you have to leave the atmosphere, and then you need to achieve a speed enough that you will complete a full circle, that you don't land back on the Earth. So it's a bigger step to go into orbit. It's a lot harder. So if the Starship is able to complete an orbit, go around, that's automatically good, because then we have a huge rocket that has a huge amount of payload that we can send into the Earth orbit. But then if it can land itself, that's a huge milestone, because that essentially means we can start using the Starship as intended. And closing up on this segment, I think it's very hopeful, because technology moves fast, you know? iPhones came out 12 years ago, and compare an iPhone 1 to an iPhone 14. You know, there's so much things that an iPhone can do in a short amount of time. So if we look at where Starship is today, and we fast forward another 8-10 years, what does that look like, you know? And you look at how airplanes work right now, you can buy something in China and it could be here in America in a week. 20 years ago, that wasn't going to happen. You know, that just wasn't a reality. So what if another 20 years in the future, you can buy something on the moon and have it come to you on Earth, you know? Or you could live on the moon, buy something on the moon, and have it go back and forth. Like, we're at the precipice of a whole new way of living. And this test is going to be the first historical point in history where we're moving over. So that closes off my little SpaceX section, but I think it's something to look towards, you know, because it's something that it affects all of us as a whole. Do you have any comments or anything about the SpaceX stuff?
I do not.
Okay. My final little news story, and it's really not that big, it's also into SpaceX. Tom Cruise is supposedly the first civilian to have a spacewalk on the International Space Station. and they're trying to get him to film a scene in space. For me, that screams Mission Impossible, because Tom Cruise is always doing some death-defying stunt for these movies. Every Mission Impossible movie has a crazier stunt that Tom Cruise is doing. And what crazier stunt could you do besides film in space, you know? I think that is like the literal top-of-the-line movie star thing that you can do. So that's another thing that I think is cool. SpaceX will be the people who launch him to space whenever he decides to go. But that's another thing in tech that I thought was pretty interesting that was going on. You have any other stories? My ass check is right here. I had to take down that second band, and the cigar is definitely a lot stronger now.
Excellent. Our third,
I couldn't see it.
yeah, I did.
Okay, we're at the same part pretty much.
Yeah. We're to the bottom third of our podcast. The first segment is Ask an Aficionado. In general, we'll take questions from our audience, but I pulled a question, and the question is, the preface is, many cigars are sold in individual cellophane wrappers. Should I remove the cellophane prior to placing the cigar in my humidor? What about tubes? What about the bands? Are cigars best stored naked?
And when you say naked, you mean like how we have it right now, where the tobacco's like dry in the air?
No, naked is when you take all the bands off, you take the wrapper off. If it's in a tube, you take it out of the tube, and you put it in your humidor.
But that sounds wrong, because like we talked about the etiquette of ripping off the bands, so you shouldn't do that. No? No.
So it is a 50-50. Definitely take off the plastic, because if you're going to put it in your humidor, you're trying to add humidity to the cigar to make it more fresh. In actuality, it's etiquette in some circles that if you go and buy some cigars from a shop or a lounge, you don't smoke it right then or day of, because it's generally not as fresh as can be. You pop it in your humidor without the plastic so that you have tobacco on air. Keep your band, yes, that's the 50-50 part, but definitely take it out of the tube, take it out of the wrapper so that it could absorb the moisture in your humidor.
Okay. I don't think I've ever had a cigar like that, Len. I want to experience that. I don't have a humidor to like test that out. I had one before, but I didn't have cigars really to put in it.
Yeah.
Oh man. So what if you don't have a humidor? What's the best way to store your cigar if you don't have a humidor?
Keep it in the wrapper. Keep it in the tube.
And where do I stash them? I just leave it on my desk, put it in a drawer, my fridge.
Somewhere that does not subject it to excessive heat or cold.
Excessive heat or cold. Okay. So I could get like a shoebox, right? And I could just put them in there as my humidor. Could keep it away from light.
So long as you don't take it out of the wrapper and the tube, it can be anywhere that you want to store it.
I'm glad you said the tube. So I have a tube around there, like a little cigar holder. Can I take my cigar out of the cellophane and put it in the tube and then store the tube inside like a cold box?
No. Again, it goes back to the manufacturer's professional staging of the cigar for a reason. The only thing acceptable is to humidify so it doesn't waste your money. And we'll definitely do a podcast on storing and saving and rejuvenating cigars to bring them back to life, because it is possible.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, so that's a good thing to know. So I have a question.
Always there's a point of no return, but for the most part, within a couple of days, you can save a good cigar.
That'd be some good life tips to know.
Our last topic for the bottom third is in case you didn't know.
Okay. So I have an in case you didn't know. It's basically like a cigar superstition, and it's called 3 on a match. And basically, 3 on a match. I'll tell you what it is. It's a superstition believing that if 3 people share a match or a light to smoke a cigar, 1 out of the 3, or the last person to light the cigar with a match, will have bad luck, or one of them will die. So it all started from like the Crimean War all the way to World War II. It's like a war superstition between soldiers, and the logic behind it is that the first person lights their cigar, and the enemy notices, right? The second person lights the cigar, and then the enemy takes aim. The third person who lights the cigar, that is when the enemy's ready to shoot, essentially. So it goes back to like the trench warfare, you know, hiding underneath there, and everything has to be like, I don't know, life or death kind of stuff. So because of that, and it's passed on as like just regular superstition, like don't step on a crack kind of things, don't break a mirror kind of things. So it's just like, I don't think there's any validity to it. I think that superstitions hold the power that you attribute to it. Your mind is probably the thing that's causing it, less than the superstition. But that logic does apply, you know, like if you're in the dark and you're smoking cigars, you are giving away your position. So I can see how maybe sometime in history somebody did meet their end, you know, smoking. I don't know. 3 is like a weird number for people. You know, if you sneeze 3 times, that's like a bad luck. But how do you feel about that? About 3 to a match? Would you decline lighting your cigar if you were the third person?
I think it's definitely at that time. If you light up and you're the third man and you die, that's definitely not a superstition. But in today's world, I don't put a lot of stock into superstitions. But I also don't believe in sharing lights. You know, again, it goes back to that's my ritual. That's my personal time with the stick. Okay. So it brings us to the close of our first podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you. Today's episode was brought to you by the A-Box. It's a subscription for those passionate about cigars and live to tell about it. Visit theabox.org and become a member today. They make great subscription boxes. Each month you get a box of cigars curated by the staff, and it's a great way to get exposed to some sticks that are outside of your norm. Again, visit the A-Box, TheAbox.org.
You know, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. In the comments, let us know what cigar that you were smoking, you know, if you smoked a cigar during the show. Also, put in the comments, you know, the timestamp of when your ash fell. Or maybe you made it to the end of the cigar without your ash falling.
Yeah, definitely. We want to have everybody walk through this experience with us. And we'll close with thought-provoking words from a lion. I'm the lion. The only thing better than having a good cigar is a better cigar. The only thing better than that is having one more cigar. The only thing better than that is having that cigar with your son. There it is.
I like that.
All right. We appreciate our sponsors. We appreciate our guests. We appreciate the audience. And I appreciate you.
Thank you.